The ancestors of the Belmont family are doomed to confront the power of evil incarnate, Dracula. In 1917, a countess sought to revive the long-dead spirit of the vampire. Her name was Elizabeth Bartley. To revive him, she needed to travel all over Europe, enlisting help from all the powers of darkness. Two young vampire hunters set out to fulfill their destiny, push back the evil hordes, and drive the vampire back into his dark netherworld. Well, that was an ominous title screen. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Castlevania Bloodlines, a game that I'm frankly surprised it took me this long to get to. We're mostly going to be playing this game on normal mode, but before I do anything else, I do want to show off a quick few things. You set the BGM and the sound test to 5 and the sound effect to 73 and play them in that order. You unlock a very special secret if you completely power yourself up in-game. To follow that up, even though I'm not going to be taking advantage of this for technically half of this LP, we want to wait for the title screen to reset, press start, and then use our old friend. Up, up, down, down, left, right, BA. That means I've now, if you check back in the options, activated the ability to play on expert mode, as well as increase your extra lives to 9. I don't do that for the main part of this playthrough, but I do it for the secondary part. We have two playable characters this time around, John Morse, who plays closer to the Belmonts of yore, and Eric Lacar, but we're going to be starting off with good old John. I love that intro. It's clearly just a riff on Castlevania 4's, but it's just so good. Either way, starting off, John, control-wise, and same with the card, Eric for this matter, play almost exactly the same as Belmonts from Castlevania 1 through 3. They didn't inherit Simon's control from Castlevania 4 at all. Once you make a jump, you are dedicated to it. However, John does have a little bit of a bonus to him. He can whip his whip diagonally while in midair, and he can hook onto ceilings using that and use little, basically swing around Indiana Jones style, and even kick enemies. Subweapons are a bit different in this game, as are hearts. Hearts are no longer your ammunition for your subweapons this time around, jewels are, and there are only 3, technically 4 subweapons. The axe, the holy water, and that little crescent boomerang I had for a moment ago. The crescent boomerang is basically just a holy cross. You're flying it forward, it comes back to you. The axe is the same as it was, as was the holy water. However, something I don't take advantage of in this LP, both because I forgot about it, and because I want to save my jewels for the subweapon I currently have, is if you press up before you press C to use your subweapons, at least that's what the default control is, you use a souped up version that costs between 3 and 4 hearts instead of the usual amount. And the benefit to that is mostly that they cover more of the screen. They go straight forward instead of just their usual arcs. I think they do a bit more damage. For powering up your weapon all the way, not only do you get a really strong version of whatever your weapon is, but you also get a unique sub-weapon that homes in on enemies in the case of John, and it trails all over the place. And as you may have heard, that little BGM sound test thing I did earlier was to do that one specific trick. When you fully power yourself up with that code, one of 3 classic Castlevania tracks will play, either Vampire Killer, Bloody Tears, or Beginning, from Castlevanias 1 through 3 respectively. Also, that poor wolf didn't stand a chance. You need to watch out in that fight though, because the fire breath it has is annoying to dodge, but something that's more annoying to dodge, partially due to the slowdown, partially due to the amount they throw at you of it at once, is when it howls, it breaks the glass in the background, and you do need to watch out for what glass breaks where. Otherwise, you're going to take a hit. And if you have that fully powered up whip or spear, depending on what character you're playing on, you don't want to get hit, because that causes you to lose that power up, and if you have the classic music code enabled, you're also losing the really good music. Mind you, I will say on the whole, I think between this and Castlevania 4, this has the overall better soundtrack. Castlevania 4's soundtrack is a good and threatening, ominous mix of atmospheric pieces, but this is much closer to Castlevania 1 through 3's high-energy music, and it just works so well. Also new is, in the candles, you can occasionally get blue versions of the jewels, which are bigger versions of hearts, essentially. Actually, wait, no, that's not new at all. That was in Castlevania 4 as well. What am I talking about? Something that is new, though, is that the candles now actually distinguish whether or not they're going to be jewels or anything else. If it's jewels or point bags, they're double candelabras. If it's a sub-weapon, it's a single candle. So make sure you pay attention to what you're whipping, otherwise you might end up losing a sub-weapon you really like. The way this LP is going to be handled, pace-wise, is we alternate characters each stage. Stages 1, 3, and 5, because this is a 6-stage game, are John. Stages 2, 4, and 6 are Eric. Additionally, while I am playing on normal mode, expert mode, which you unlock either by beating the game or inputting the Konami code of the title screen like I did, does extend each character's ending, and I will be showing the full extended ending because I did at least play through the final stage on expert mode on my own time just to record the full endings. Now, if you're from Europe, you don't know this game as Castlevania Bloodlines. In fact, this is the rare game in this franchise that got a different name everywhere it went. In Japan, it was just known as Vampire Killer, because this was actually the first game in the franchise to call the whip by what it is now famously known as. Here in the US, it's Bloodlines, but in Europe, it is Castlevania The Next Generation, because apparently the word blood was banned in video games at the time in that region. Additionally, some various graphics were changed, because this game does emphasize the blood in that a lot of things bleed all over the place when you hit them. The zombies in this stage, the wolf mid-boss, so on and so forth. But now we're on to the boss of the first stage, the Armor Battler. This thing will tumble all over the place, trying to hit you with either its spear or its axe. The axe, it tries to rotate its arm into you, and the spear, it'll either jump into a slash with it or just do one that you can dodge by, I believe, ducking a certain distance away from it. The more you damage it, the less attacks it has, but something you can also do here is use Morse's swinging ability to latch onto the top platform and then kick it. The good thing about using the kick ability with John Morse's whip chain, though, is that you're completely invulnerable while you're doing it. So that's a very good way to get to this boss very easily. Collect the orb, and as usual, stage completed, score is tallied. I didn't use the Konami code stuff with John because I wanted him to be closer to a traditional playthrough, but with Eric, I do use it. Also, here's the password system, relatively self-explanatory, honestly. Alright, starting off with Eric over in Stage 2, and as the plot synopsis at the start stated, we're actually not spending much time in Castlevania in this game. We're traveling all over Europe, and it's some very welcome environment variety. Eric has much more range than John from the start because he's using a spear. In fact, Symphony of the Night players, this would later become the a la carte spear that you could get in that game. He's already at Stage 2 here, or technically Stage 3 with his spear, and the best thing about upgrades with the spear for Eric is that not only does it get longer, but if you hold the button, it'll also do another hit of contact at that point. In fact, that seems to be a general thing with this game. If you hold the button, you might do more damage. Maybe? They don't get unique sub-weapons, though. But two unique abilities that Eric does have is that he can hold down on the D-pad, and after about a second, he'll start glowing green. You can take a bit of a note out of Mario Brothers 2 USA / no, I don't even think that ability wasn't Doki Doki Panic, was it? He has a super jump that allows him to jump higher than any other way to jump in the game. That's because there are at least 2 instances in this game, completely different pathways that each character takes. However, I don't show them off, mostly because I had other priorities, I'll be real. Additionally, if you attack with Eric, and then press the D-pad in the opposite direction, he does a little spinning move with his spear that is surprisingly good for coverage. A good comparison is to compare it to Simon's little whip flail by holding the attack button and then mashing the D-pad all over the place in Castlevania 4. Compared to other Castlevania games, though, my origins with this one are much more, I don't want to say more recent, but definitely more of my current era, because I remember, I think I've told this story, my brother got me into emulation by putting FCEU on the family computer and telling me to just mess around and have fun. By the way, this mini-boss doesn't actually actively attack you, it teleports all over the place, but its gimmick is that it's slowly filling the water at the top of the screen. If it gets too high, you die. By the way, as I was saying, after my brother put FCEU Ultra on our computer, I kind of got into my own emulation schemes, and that brought me to Keg of Fusion, and I saw Castlevania. I liked Castlevania, so I went, hey, Castlevania Bloodlines, let's play it. And then I just really liked it. Notable thing, though, this game is a bit harder than its predecessors in one major regard, in that continues aren't infinite in this game. Compared to Castlevania 1, 2, and 3, where if you die, you can start over and over and over again, never leaving the stage. Eventually, there will be a case, if you continuously die, that you need to use the password feature. And while it sucks, because the stages in this game are longer than I think any of the first 3 games, and even 4 to an extent, it's not that big of a deal, honestly, because despite that, I honestly feel the stages in this game are arguably the easiest in the classic Vania series. Mostly just due to the fact of what you have compared with the abilities you have. Though this game does love its mini-bosses. Each stage has at least 1 to 3. It gets a little ridiculous later on. Also, this game's soundtrack, I already know I mentioned it's fantastic, but this is also a track that would appear a couple other times in the series from here on. I think it's called the Sinking Old Sanctuary. I know it appeared in Circle of the Moon, where that's probably my favorite mix in the series. I think it was also in Castlevania 64, but don't quote me on that because I've never finished that game. I intend to, but I haven't yet. Well, we'll get to it. Maybe. The main reason I wanted to alternate stages or characters per stage is really just so both playstyles can get a good amount of screen time. Compared to, say, like Symphony of the Night, I'm never going to do a Richter run of that because to me there's no point, or a Maria run. Actually, if I ever perhaps decide to do the Saturn version of that game, maybe I'll show off Maria, but I don't know yet. Now, I did mention Expert Mode earlier. From my knowledge of it, because I've seldom done a complete playthrough of it, the last time I did was maybe 2014, if even. The main difference is the amount of damage you take from enemies and bosses fights especially, and I think they might have more health, or at least you do less damage, but I'm not exactly sure about that part. From my knowledge, the patterns don't change much, if at all. I think the only change I can think of comes in regards to one attack of the final boss, and even then, I think because I usually play this game with Eric, it's just that I don't let that attack get off. Ugh! Yeah, that wasn't in the European version. Eric, as a playstyle, though, is a very welcome addition to the series because, yeah, he has the range like a Belmont, same with John, but the way you attack and the rapid fire you can have is just so much more interesting. Plus, the coverage you get is just fantastic. Compared to John, though, his level 4 special is a bit different from when you fully power up your weapon. While, yes, your spear acts the same, it's just more damaging. His sub-weapon, instead of homing in on enemies, you set down basically a nucleus of sorts that shoots out energy balls in just about every direction randomly. For stages, it's arguably... Actually, no, I'd say John's is better for stages, but Eric's is better for boss fights. Also, while the Genesis soundtrack does good with this soundtrack, some of the sound effects in this game sound a bit... how do I phrase this? Farts. They sound like farts. And that's mostly because the Genesis and its twang, they hold a special place in people's heart, don't get me wrong. But sometimes it was just kind of bad. Castlevania music works well in it, though, thankfully, compared to series that didn't work too well in it, like Mega Man, outside of Wily Tower, but that's because Wily Tower wasn't made for this sound chip. Now we're coming up on the boss fight for this stage, who is both one of my favorite bosses and least favorite bosses, the Golem. This thing is an attack sponge, the best way to put it. The thing we need to attack is its head there on the top right with the red eye. But we need to get it on screen first, which means we need to take down its body section by section. Each of which take at least 4 or 5 shots with your weapon, depending on their level. Meaning, this boss, takes maybe the most damage to defeat out of any in the game, barring maybe the final boss. Eric does have a benefit in this boss fight, though, in that he can reach the head sooner than John can. I can technically reach it right now just by attacking upwards. John, though, does have to destroy an extra segment. He has to destroy the little belt there. I guess maybe it's the lowest part of the body in order to actually damage the head. Not too bad. In fact, attack-wise, beyond touch damage and swinging its arm around, the golem only has 1 attack, and that's to cause debris to fall from the ceiling. So as long as you're keeping an eye on what's around you, this fight is pretty easy. Although I do like how the head gets more and more destroyed the farther in the fight you get. That's cool. An interesting thing to know about the Mega Jump as well with Eric is that every time you use it, the direction you're facing reverses. So if in case you're trying to use this to avoid a boss's attack and then immediately lead in to damage them, make sure you start by facing away from the boss fight. That only really comes into play in my experience during the first phase of the final boss, but it's worth noting all the same. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we're going to head back to John to take on Stage 3. See you guys then.